So it's leftover lunch / soup supper. And Emma Hibbard is here today. And she was an intern with Climable in the summer of 2018. And she's doing some pretty rad work with microgrids at a community college. And she's also, I think you're also an SEI fellow, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'll let you tell us more.
Cool. Yeah. So I was an intern in 2018. And then after I left Climable, I came out to Berkeley and I did a summer sustainability program with their energy and resources group. That was mostly because I didn't have that much like base level coursework and that kind of sustainability work. And then after that, I was just looking for jobs around here and I found this job. So I'm an energy and sustainability associate with the Sonoma County Junior College District, which is, it's a community college district. It's just called a junior college district out here. And then I'm also a fellow with Strategic Energy Innovations Climate Core program. So that's basically, they focus on placing people with sites that otherwise wouldn't have the funding to be doing the kind of sustainability or energy or outreach work. So they really focus on a lot of nonprofits, a lot of community colleges, and those kinds of organizations. So that's how I ended up in Sonoma. So I live in Santa Rosa, or I live in Petaluma now, but I work up in Santa Rosa, where the junior college is. And I'm loving it. It's super cool. It's a really beautiful area. And my boss, who is the energy and sustainability manager, is always doing like super cool things with energy and all this innovative stuff on campus, which is great. Do you want me to launch right in, or should we just do other introductions first?
I think we can, well, what do you think, Jeannie? You're on mute. You want it? Yes. I think probably just keep going. I think this is a sign that we just keep going.
Okay. Did Emma get a chance to hear from Aaliyah and Alex a little bit? Or?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's launch.
Okay, great. We'll just see if Sonia joins in at some point. Yeah, so the Sonoma County Junior College District, there are 5 campuses in Sonoma County. I work at the main one, the Santa Rosa one. It's our biggest campus. The other ones are just kind of smaller campuses around the county. So our campuses are all located basically, I was talking with Jen a little bit about this, but basically right where all the largest fires in Sonoma County are happening. So the Kincaid fire, which just happened this year, was burning, 10 to 15 miles away from me. And then even within a couple miles of the junior college. And then all these people were being evacuated and the public safety power shutoffs were happening. So we basically had, our entire county was either being evacuated or didn't have power. So it was this incredible, like, new normal that it is now with the power safety shutoffs in California. They're probably going to be just as bad this fall, to be honest. So it's just showing this huge increasing need for these emergency services and providing this kind of community support to these folks that year after year are going to be getting hit with either fires or shutoffs and evacuations. So it was kind of crazy to come out and have that be like my first fall here. So that was wild. So I think everyone probably knows what the power safety shutoffs are, but it's basically in times of fire, PG&E is basically just cutting power to all their major lines to prevent sparking, and that's what's causing all of the fires. So my boss a couple years ago in 2018 applied for a grant from the California Energy Commission to do this microgrid demonstration project. And his main idea was basically this: providing resiliency for the community, providing energy savings for the college, and providing this like new highly adaptive microgrid model that can be used by people all over the state, policymakers, regulators, other colleges, other sites that are also trying to do the same work. So he developed this project. We now have solar up on our campus and we're working to get the other pieces of it going. But basically, the microgrid is composed of 2.7 megawatts of solar and then 3 different lithium-ion batteries. One of them is I think it's a 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt hour battery, and then 2 1 megawatt, 1 megawatt hour batteries. So that's what composes the solar and the battery storage. The solar is in three different installations on campus right now. There's 2 solar canopies, and that for like parking structures, and then 1 just rooftop one.
Zoom is really acting up today, Bob.
We can hear you.
Really acting up today.
Okay, hopefully she's still on. So it's composed of that solar and then our battery storage, and we already have 1 battery and we're working on getting the others. And then the third component of the microgrid is this advanced microgrid controller. So basically the microgrid controller is, there's an individual controller on all 27 buildings on our campus, or there will be. This is the part that isn't installed yet because we just got the grant in 2018. So there will be an individual one on every single campus, and then this overall larger microgrid controller that's a localized microgrid controller. So it'll be like right there on campus, which I didn't know too much about microgrid controllers before this, but that apparently makes it much more reliable. And then the response time is a lot quicker because what they want to do on our campus is have it super like automated, really quick time, like very small reaction time to various grid changes, power shutoffs, anything that's happening. So all 27 buildings are going to be on our microgrid controller, and then they're all in different tiers of, we've categorized them in different tiers of basically importance. So during regular operation, when PG&E is still supplying our power, and we also have a couple other power suppliers, a community aggregate supplier. But when that's all happening, we're just going to use the microgrid basically to help load shed, help reduce our own energy costs, take off peak times. So that's one of the main points of the microgrid. The microgrid is to get that additional revenue stream through demand management, that kind of thing. And then when the microgrid is disconnected from the system, so when one of these power safety shutoffs happens or the fires happen that damage the grid in some way, then the microgrid will just separate itself, isolate itself from the greater grid. So we have a certain number, our tier 1 buildings, our most essential buildings, so that will include like a large space for places for the community to come. It includes our data centers, so we don't lose any revenue from lost operation when there are power shutoffs. That's our tier 1, so that will always be kept on, and the microgrid can keep that on indefinitely. So it's configured so that the solar will charge the battery and the battery will always be able to discharge, and that could just be kept on forever no matter how long this outages last. If we were to be operating 100% full capacity, the microgrid could sustain us for maybe 3 to 4 hours. So the ability of our microgrid to do its adaptive load shedding that they're really focusing on, and being able to shed different buildings at different times in these different tiers, and then kind of reconfigure to have whatever buildings are the most vital at that time to still be getting power. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, and one of the main goals of this project is to see this play out in real time. So there's not that many projects like this right now. So the JC is working with the California Energy Commission, with PG&E, with all these local, like with state regulators, and a lot of people have been coming to talk about this project because it really is going to be kind of a learning while we do it kind of thing, especially with interconnection the interconnection with PG&E. That's something that has to be kind of worked out as we go. And then this microgrid smart controller is another thing that hasn't been used that much yet, especially in this configuration. So let's see if I missed anything. Yeah, so it's basically I don't know exactly. The pandemic has kind of shut down operation for a little bit, and the actual going onto campus. So that's been slowing down our project a little bit. But where I'm actually I'm kind of picking up on this project recently, and I'm about to start, we want to look at expanding the microgrid. So the campus is super centrally located. So it has, a bunch of community schools around, it has hospitals around, there's an armory nearby. So it's a very centrally located place. That's why we picked this campus to do the microgrid for. And then our other campuses two of our other campuses are actually further north, like actually within where the fires have been burning. So it's right there in the middle of everything. And even though we don't totally have this one planned out and executed yet, the grant money that we received from the California Energy Commission is going to be enough to get us almost all the way there, if not all the way there. And then my boss wants to start looking at developing a microgrid for the other campuses around, and kind of expanding that out, and then looking at expanding it further into the community. So it's a super interesting project. There's a lot of components that are pretty much constantly moving, especially with our communications with regulators and PG&E, and then figuring out how this feeding back into the grid is going to work, frequency support for the grid is going to work, voltage support for the grid. But it's a really super cool project, and obviously super relevant for this time of power safety shutoffs and fires going on. So I'll leave the basic summary there.
Cool.
Does anyone have any questions on that?
Companies like PPE or the California Public Utilities Commission know about this, and if so, how do they feel about it?
Of all of these fires and kind of being majorly at fault for most of them, they're kind of scrambling to improve their image in the face of all of this a little bit. So they're actually a partner on this project, and they're working with the engineers and a couple of our other partners on the project to facilitate that connection between the microgrid and PG&E. And so that they're sometimes a little difficult to work with, from what I can tell from my boss. I don't deal with them directly, but yeah, they can be a little difficult to work with, but they're actually a partner in working with us on it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Are companies like that generally supportive of microgrid projects in the community?
I don't totally know. I mean, I think California, at least the California Public Utilities Commission and Energy Commission, are really pushing for this. We have some really, really ambitious goals out here with, % renewable energy that various retail electricity sellers have to produce by 2050. So they kind of have to be supportive of it at this point, and it kind of has to be like they have to adjust to this, or else yeah, they're legally required to. So I don't know that they love being supportive of it. It's a huge switch up for them, but yeah. I mean, what's it been like in Massachusetts? Is that, are utility companies supportive of it there?
We tend to think of California as the people pushing the bar when it comes to that, I think.
Yeah.
I think I saw Sonia pop up. Did she have a question? If not, I had one. So you're saying that PG&E, I forgot the name of the mandatory shutoffs, but
Public safety power shutoffs. They did a cute little PSPS thing.
PSPS or whatever. PSPS. So when they do the public safety power shutoff, how long were those? Like when you were arriving in town, you're like, I arrived in the middle of these things.
Yeah.
And you said the batteries like can carry the full load, which I know is probably wouldn't be the case for 3 or 4 hours. Like, what's the discrepancy between the length of the outage and the batteries?
Pretty large. So if the campus was operating at full power, you know, just everything running, that's excuse me, 3 to 4 hours. But the shutoffs, at least that they're kind of off and on depending where you are. I live actually kind of close to downtown Petaluma, so we didn't have it as bad as other places in the county. But my shutoffs were, I think, probably 2.5 days. No power, and then it came on a little, and then it went back off for another few hours. But there were some people, you know, in more remote areas where the fires actually happened that are, you know, they were out of power for a week and a half, 2 weeks. So it really depends where you are, the discrepancy between that. So that's why the adaptive load shedding of the microgrid is super important, because PG&E also doesn't tell you how long it's going to last. There's little to no warning when it's going to happen. It's kind of just like, hey, this is going to happen. It might happen to you. And then the only time the map is accurate as to like where the shutoffs are happening or when they're already happened. So the super quick reaction time of the microgrid is very important for that. And then the load shedding, once there is kind of a forecast of how long those will last.
And so would you see the people with the super long shutoffs that are in maybe the more rural areas, are they going to come to the college in that case if they need shelter or something?
That's the goal. So it would be if they need, you know, something as basic as charging a phone or somewhere to come and get resources or communicate where they're going to go if they're being evacuated, or it's kind of whatever they need it to be. It's really supposed to be like a very adaptive community resource. So so hopefully they would be able to come. I think for the most part, a lot of the really remote places get evacuated now. This year was the first year they tried a really really quite dramatic evacuation strategy. So anyone that was within, you know, 10, 15 miles of the fire was being evacuated. So it's a huge number of people displaced, and, you know, a lot of people don't have somewhere to go. So we want the college to be somewhere where they can either go for a short amount of time or use it as a resource to figure out their next step.
And so this is a demonstration project, but you guys are already talking about replicating it.
Yeah, that's just because, I mean, there's just such a need for it now. And so, like, my boss is so ambitious and innovative, which is so great. So he is thinking about, you know, how can we expand this to buildings around the Santa Rosa campus and get it out to the other community buildings around to make this an even bigger resource, given the amount of displacement and lack of power and resources that the area is going to have for a while. I mean, and this goes beyond just the shutoffs. This Sonoma County is, at least around the college, like a big place for flooding. It's a big place for, you know, California has all types of weather things, but really anything that happens. I think we'll wait to expand until this current one is in place and going, but there's enough support and interest that it makes a case for it.
Yeah, I have lots of, like, once it's operating, I'm going to have questions of like the economics, because I'm in the weeds on something else related to the economics of microgrids, but I'm really curious about how that works out. Does anyone else have questions that they want to jump in with? Because I'm totally taking over.
I have a semi-technical question, which I'm not sure if you would be able to answer, but
I can try.
I'm curious about how the load shedding works, how it determines which buildings are in most need. Is that like a manual thing, or is there software that determines that?
Yeah, so there are a couple different ways this can happen. This is pretty high level because I haven't totally been working on that aspect of it. But it's basically, there's there's 3 tiers of buildings. So there's a few central ones that are automatic, like I said, like there's a gathering area, there's our data center. So those kinds of like essential things that if they lost power, they would either no longer be a good resource for the community, or they would lose all the college's data. So that's like on tier 1. Tier 2 would be, I'm kind of blanking on specific details of tier 2, but like tier 3 would be like people's offices, the library lights, pretty much a lot of the lighting, you know, any AC, heating, that kind of thing. So it's actually based more on how the buildings are used. So there's the 3 structures based on what the buildings are used for. And then the other aspect of the load shedding is that if there is kind of like a feeder or something damaged, or if there is a building damaged or something like that, then the microgrid can actually adapt and just exclude that. So it's either based on the tiers of usage, or it's based on if there's damage and if there's one building that just needs to be like siphoned off. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah,
It's probably
definitely.
not as technical as the answer could be, but
No, that's really interesting. Definitely helpful to understand.
yeah.
I guess I have a question that's more of just like about Emma, right? For you, like, can you picture yourself continuing this work, and in terms of your boss and the enthusiasm for replication, like, would you want, I'm not saying what are you going to do necessarily, but like, would you want to be the kind of microgrid person who just like helps things replicate? Like, what is a job that you could picture doing if you wanted to stay in this work?
I think the aspect of it that I really like right now is the interaction between like the community need and then the kind of technical policy side. So I've always kind of liked that kind of interdisciplinary work. So yeah, I really do like this work. I think I have a lot more learning to do. But I think some kind of position like that where it's the, I mean, it's kind of like what, I mean, it's kind of what I started with Climable, like that's kind of what got me started with that. With, yeah, the community, but then also like the technology and policy part of it and kind of where the intersection of those are.
Well, there's definitely a great need for that work in every locale, every community. So then the follow-on question is, do you see this job continuing, and would you stick around for a while if you can?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting position because it's a limited term, limited funding position. So every cycle, which is a year, my boss has to find new funding to have someone in the position that I'm in. So I'm actually in talks about that right now, but whether I'll be staying on for another year. But if I don't, my contract's actually technically up mid-July. So, but I would like to stay on for another year, and my boss has said that he's looking for funding. So I think the longest I'd stay in this job is until next June or July. Which would be great to get another year of this, but I think longer term than that, I probably wouldn't stay here just because there's not funding for a permanent position. I mean, my boss is, he's funded on Measure H bond dollars, so his position isn't even technically permanent on campus.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's an ongoing effort to keep a permanent sustainability kind of department on our campus, but it hasn't happened yet. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that sounds rough.
Yeah.
But at least you have, I mean, you're definitely developing skills that are needed. I can just imagine, that there should be microgrid champions everywhere, people who understand the technical stuff that can talk with regular people.
It's also super ironic when we're talking about like the value of resilience in there. They don't have a full-time sustainability and resilience person there.
Yeah. He just kind of, I mean, it's so relevant here now, like the resilience aspect of it, and we're seeing it play out in real time. So it's really easy to make the case for it. Yeah. But I'm actually thinking of applying to grad school this fall to go back to school for a little. So maybe after that I'll come back into it.
Awesome. What would you go to grad school for?
I'm looking at kind of a few different ones, either like energy systems and policy joint degrees, or some kind of like energy engineering and policy joint degrees. There's a lot of cool, really like integrative programs out there now. So yeah, I have a little more research to do to hone down that, but that's kind of what I'm looking at.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions before I stop recording? Or I can also just stop recording and we can continue with the questions.
I have like a general, you were at Climable before you got into this microgrid position, but how did you find Climable, or how did you start to get into like sustainability and renewable energy and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I was a physics major in college, but by my senior year, I didn't want to do a thesis on physics because there were just things way more interesting to me. So it happened to be right around when Puerto Rico was having their huge, right after Hurricane Maria hit. So I was actually writing my thesis on energy systems in Puerto Rico, and my mom used to work with Jeannie. And Jeannie had been starting her work with microgrids in Puerto Rico. So we kind of connected on that. And then I became an intern. So that was that was kind of that inception there. It was just my mom's friend. But yeah, it was basically just I was finishing out my undergrad degree and knew that that's kind of what I wanted to go into. So I kind of made a thesis that I wanted to do and that was interesting to me, and then went from there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm September. I'm going to turn off the recording, guys, but this has been a really interesting conversation, and I'm sure we can keep talking.